Hi, my name's Billy, and today I'm going to talk to you about fanfictions. The official definition of the word fanfiction is a fiction written by fans of a TV series, movies, etc., using existing characters and situations to develop new plots, according to dictionary.com at the very least. The origin of it started with a very well known show from the 60s, Star Trek. Everybody knows about Star Trek. Back in the day, people used to love that show so much that they used to make fan magazines of it. For example, Spockanalia, which sparked the first fan fictions as we know them today, was made back in the 70s and was exchanged at conventions. So there were no ways to get that thing other than if you knew somebody making it. Because it wasn't a real magazine, it's just something made by fans. That's where they would exchange stories that they made up of with the characters they love and the settings they find interesting. Something really funny about this is that most writers of these back in the 60s and 70s were women. In the 60s, it was around 85% of those writers that were, and in the 70s, it got up to 90% of them. So only 10% of the fan fiction writers were men, which is something quite interesting for back in the day when women weren't treated as well as they are now. Now, as the years went by, they started evolving and being more popular and more common, but not until we got to the World Wide Web. It's because of email chains and websites that would be dedicated to such things that we were able to make fanfictions even more accessible. With email chains, you would get onto a mailing list and receive an email of the story every time the person would write a bit of it. It was still very amateur, and back then it wasn't like very well developed or anything. It wasn't something that you could consider a work of fiction that could be turned into a book, something like that. But with the apparition of websites dedicated to specific fandoms, we were able to find better fan fictions that were well written and on more specific topics. People would go to these websites, and still do actually, and find a specific fandom they like, whether it be Star Wars, Star Trek, Grey's Anatomy, anything really. You can find stories written about your favorite characters, or just the setting in general, written by fans just like you. Especially in 1998, when fanfiction.net opened, that it gave a place for all fanfictions to be found, not just specific fandoms, because before that you'd have to go on a new site to find anything about new fandoms. You couldn't find stuff about Star Wars and then on the same site find something about Gilmore Girls. That was impossible because people would make dedicated sites. But fanfiction.net tried to regroup all of those together to find a way to bring them all to one place and make it easier for everyone to find them. Following fanfiction.net's success, many websites opened, giving ways to new forms of writing for fanfictions, just like Wattpad. Wattpad is one of the biggest websites for fanfiction, probably the biggest one nowadays. The way it works is that you can write a story and publish it as a supposed book that you can then have comments on by other users, and sometimes you can get it translated by somebody else on the website. You can make follow-up books and everything. You can just write a lot of stuff about anything you want. At first it was just for stories in general, trying to find places to publish said stories and everything, but it grew into a big fanfiction community. It even sparked probably the biggest fandom of all time in fanfiction history, the One Directioners. The way they work is that they'll write stories about their favorite guys in the boy band, about either, well, meeting them or stories that happen between the band members and everything. It just gets real crazy. If you go look on there, there are so many stories about One Direction, Justin Bieber, celebrities, famous YouTubers nowadays too, and movies, a lot of movies like, for example, Twilight, which eventually sparked a fanfiction that became so big it got made into books and then movies recently, 50 Shades of Grey. At first it was just Twilight fanfiction, but got so popular, the author made a book out of it. Actually, 3 books, sadly. Now, there are a lot of types and genres of fan fictions, way too many of them for me to just tell you all about them, so I'm going to list a few of them and explain them. The first one is an alternate universe, in which the story takes place in a different version of the show or the reality the characters of the fan fiction live in. So, for example, let's say you're reading about Lord of the Rings, but this time the characters are in a sci-fi setting, so they're in space. Why not? That's fun. People like that. The second type that I'm going to talk about is angst. It's often written by teenagers. It's mostly about being angry at stuff. Sometimes it'll be mostly ideas like, oh, I'm writing about myself and how my parents are horrible, so I'm gonna be friends with Harry Potter and we're gonna run away from my parents and be happy together forever. These types of fanfiction are often found online and are less than well written, let's say it like that. The third type is crossover fictions, in which you'll take 2 genres or 2 stories or 2 famous things and put them together to create a new story. For example, putting the characters of Doctor Who in Harry Potter. Some people find it enjoyable to create stories about their favorite characters meeting and having adventures together and doing stuff. It's quite fun to read those if you're into the 2 genres or the 2 fandoms that are being depicted. Sometimes they'll even go with 3, 4, 5. They can go on forever and ever and ever, adding more and more characters from different universes, and everything can get really wild out there. The fourth type is dark fics. Dark fics are as edgy as they sound. Basically, it's writing something that you feel is more depressing or more emo or something that people would consider deep and really in the darkest of your emotions and everything. This, just like the angst, fanfictions are often written by teenagers, seeing as their hormones are acting up. They're gonna go write about their sad lives or transfix them into stories. The fifth type of story that I want to talk about is Peggy Sue stories, in which you just put a new character that can be anyone but is actually supposed to be you, but not literally you, just a fictionalized version of you. You then hang out with the main characters of your favorite shows, or go on an adventure with the character of your favorite book, things like that. Sixth type of fanfiction is shipping. Shipping fictions are a bit more, adult, let's say. It involves taking 2 characters that are in no way in a relationship in the original work of fiction and making them in a relationship. For example, the people who like the show Supernatural often like to put the 2 main characters, who are brothers, may I remind you, together in a relationship and doing adult stuff. It's quite weird to read. The 7th type is literal self-insert. A self-insert story is when you put yourself in the story. Like, let's say your name is Jimmy John. So the story will be Jimmy John and Harry Potter fight the evil forces. And you'll just be writing about your adventures in a certain world, but without any restraint compared to the Peggy Sue stories that just input someone that is a fictionalized version of you. The last type I want to talk about is extremely wild, a bit like the shipping fanfictions. It is smut. Smut fiction is where you write about porn. You just write a porno, but with your favorite characters from TV shows or books or children's cartoons or whatever you want, but it's a bit disgusting. I could go on for quite a while as there are a lot more genres, but let's stop here for now with smut. It's quite disgusting. Just think about it. Now, the big question about fanfiction is often, is it legal? Well, not really. It's not considered legal, as you're just using intellectual properties to create your own stories. Of course, if you're writing about celebrities, it's a bit more lenient because nobody has the rights to someone's name unless they're fictionalized and trademarked. So you can write all you want about like bands, but don't write about TV shows and try to publish them because that's illegal. And basically, there are ways to work around those problems. Sometimes very famous stories will get published either in an unofficial state, which is saying you're not affiliated with the official company which trademarked the intellectual properties. For example, the video game Minecraft has around a few dozen books written about it. None of them have been published by anything in relation to the company that holds the rights to Minecraft. But still, they get sold in big libraries everywhere around the world for some reason. Or in other cases, if you want to publish a big book that's really that's really got a lot of fans online and you think you could make some money with it, but it's about a celebrity, you can change the name of the celebrity to make it easier to sell it in bookstores, since it can't get any bad rep from the celebrity themselves. Nowadays, though, we've got a new thing that takes care of all those problems, the legal problems. It's called Kindle Worlds, just like the Amazon Fire, Kindle Fire, or whatever it's called, the little e-readers. Well, now they've made a subdivision of that company just for fan fictions on specific intellectual properties that Amazon owns. The only problem with that is that they're not good intellectual properties and nobody cares about them. So in the end, nobody uses it and nobody sells any books with it. It's not really that useful. I'll leave you with this thought. The longest work of written fiction in the English language is a fanfiction about Nintendo characters working together with the author of the fanfiction to save the world. It's got 3,500,000 words so far, and it's still going on. So fanfictions can be incredible. They can be amazing. They can be horrible. They can be weird. They can be so many things. And they help us create our own worlds or use worlds that were there before to make new ideas come to life. Fanfictions are good most of the time.